The water drop hit his $10,000 suit sleeve, and Elena Chen knew her life was about to explode. What the arrogant Japanese billionaire said next, in his native language, thinking she was too stupid to understand, was so vicious, so degrading, that it would have broken most people. But he had no idea who he was really dealing with, because in exactly 47 seconds, this simple waitress would speak one flawless sentence in perfect Japanese that would shatter his world completely and hand her a future she'd only dreamed about. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to Unbroken Truths. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Quick question. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. I love seeing our global family grow. And hey, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button right now, because the stories we share here, stories about ordinary people showing extraordinary courage, these are the truths that need to be heard. Now let me tell you about Elena Chen and the night that changed everything. Elena was 24 years old, and if you'd seen her that Tuesday evening, you wouldn't have given her a second glance. Just another server in a crisp black uniform, dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, carrying plates through the dining room of the Sterling Crown, one of London's most exclusive restaurants. The kind of place where a single meal cost more than Elena made in a week, where chandeliers sparkled like captured starlight, and the carpet was so plush your feet disappeared into it with every step. But here's what you wouldn't have known by looking at her. Elena Chen was living two lives. By night, she served the wealthy elite who never really looked at her face, who saw the uniform, not the person, who left generous tips and still somehow made her feel invisible. By day, she was a linguistics student at London University. Not just any student, she was top of her class. She could speak French like she'd been born in Paris, Spanish that would fool someone from Barcelona. Mandarin was so fluent her professors were in awe. And Japanese, her true gift, her secret weapon, she spoke it like a native from Tokyo, complete with all the subtle social nuances that even some Japanese people struggled with. She spent an entire year in Tokyo on a full academic scholarship, living with a host family in Setagaya, studying at Waseda University, one of Japan's most prestigious institutions. She immersed herself completely, not just learning the language, but understanding the culture, the unspoken rules, the delicate art of Japanese communication, where what you don't say is often more important than what you do. She wrote her entire master's thesis on honorific speech patterns in modern Japanese society. She could hear the difference between respectful and casual Japanese, the way a sommelier could taste the difference between a good wine and a great one. But none of that mattered at the Sterling Crown. There, she was just Elena, the waitress. Another pair of hands to pour wine and clear plates, another face that blended into the background of other people's important evenings. Her manager, Richard Pemberton, was the kind of man who sweated through his shirts by noon and treated his staff like disposable props in his personal theater of hospitality. He cared about two things: impressing wealthy customers and protecting his own job, in that order. Then there was Catherine. Catherine Hartley had worked at the Sterling Crown for 7 years and treated the place like her personal kingdom. She had cold blue eyes that cataloged every mistake, every moment of weakness, and a smile that never quite reached those calculating eyes. From Elena's first day, Catherine had seen her as a threat, younger, faster, with a natural warmth that customers responded to. So Catherine had made it her mission to make Elena's life miserable in 1,000 small, cruel ways. The worst tables, the most demanding customers, forgetting to tell Elena when orders were ready, spreading whispers and rumors among the other staff. Nothing Elena could formally complain about, but enough to make every shift feel like walking through a minefield while someone kept moving the mines. Elena endured it all because she had no choice. This job paid for her university fees, her tiny flat in East London where the heating never quite worked, her food, her life. She was so close to finishing her degree, so close to a better future. She just had to hold on a little longer. On this particular Tuesday evening, something felt different the moment Elena walked through the staff entrance. The air crackled with tension. Richard Pemberton was practically vibrating with anxiety, his face redder than usual, sweat already darkening his collar, even though the shift hadn't started. The other servers were clustered in tight groups, whispering urgently to each other. "What's going on?" Elena asked Marco, one of the kitchen staff. His eyes went wide. "You haven't heard? Kenji Nakamura is coming tonight." Elena's heart skipped a beat. Everyone knew that name. Kenji Nakamura, the Ice Emperor, the newspapers called him. One of the wealthiest men in Asia. A Japanese real estate magnate who built an empire buying and developing properties from Tokyo to New York to London. He was famous for two things: his brilliant, ruthless business mind and his absolutely terrifying temper. The business press loved writing about him. Stories of him destroying competitors, of him walking out of meetings when something displeased him, of entire companies crumbling because they'd somehow offended him. He was known for demanding perfection and accepting nothing less. Richard Pemberton gathered all the staff in the kitchen, his hands actually trembling. "Listen very carefully," he said, his voice tight with stress. "Mr. Nakamura has reserved our best table tonight. This is the most important reservation we've had all year. Everything, and I mean everything, must be absolutely perfect." Everyone nodded, the gravity of the situation sinking in. Then Pemberton's eyes landed on Elena. "Chen, you'll be serving table 12, his table." Elena felt her stomach drop to her feet. Table 12 was center stage in the dining room, the most visible table in the entire restaurant. She glanced over at Catherine, who was standing with her arms crossed, a satisfied smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. This was a setup. Either Elena would fail spectacularly in front of everyone, or she somehow succeeds, and Catherine would find another way to make her pay for it later. "Sir," Elena began carefully, "perhaps someone with more experience should—" "I've made my decision, Chen," Pemberton cut her off sharply. "Don't disappoint me." As Elena straightened her apron and took a deep breath, she had absolutely no idea that the next few hours would change everything. Her hidden knowledge of those years of study, that year in Tokyo, all those hours perfecting her Japanese, would become the key to the most important moment of her entire life. The clock on the wall ticked towards 7 o'clock. The storm was coming, and Elena Chen was standing right in its path. At exactly 7 o'clock, the front doors of the Sterling Crown opened, and Kenji Nakamura walked in. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. He was a man in his late 50s, tall and lean, wearing a suit so perfectly tailored it probably cost more than a car. His black hair was streaked with distinguished silver at the temples, and his face was set in an expression of permanent displeasure, as if everything around him existed slightly beneath his standards. But it was his eyes that truly commanded attention. Dark, sharp, calculating. The eyes of a predator constantly assessing its surroundings for weakness. He wasn't alone. Two younger men flanked him, both Japanese, both wearing expensive suits that still didn't quite match the quality of their bosses. They looked nervous, shoulders tight, smiles forced and brittle. These were junior executives from his company, Elena realized. Men who learned that being close to Kenji Nakamura was both an incredible opportunity and a constant test of survival. Richard Pemberton practically ran to greet them, bowing so deeply, Elena thought he might topple over. "Mr. Nakamura, welcome, welcome! What an absolute honor to have you dining with us this evening." Nakamura's cold gaze swept over the manager like he was examining an insect he might decide to crush. He didn't offer a handshake. He didn't smile. He simply said in heavily accented English, "My table." It wasn't a question. It was a command. Of course, of course! Right this way, sir." Pemberton gestured frantically toward table 12, leading the group across the dining room. Other diners turned to look, whispering to each other behind their hands. Everyone recognized him. The atmosphere in the room shifted and became charged with the presence of real power, real money, real danger. Elena watched them approach, her heart hammering against her ribs. She served difficult customers before celebrities, politicians, wealthy business people who treated service staff like furniture. But this felt different. There was something about Nakamura's presence that seemed to lower the temperature in the room by several degrees. As Pemberton seated them with theatrical flourishes, he gestured toward Elena with a trembling hand. "And this is Elena, Mr. Nakamura. She'll be taking care of you this evening. She's one of our finest servers." Elena stepped forward, her professional smile fixed in place. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the Sterling Crown. Nakamura's eyes flicked to her for exactly 1 second. In that brief moment, Elena felt herself being assessed, categorized, and dismissed. She might as well have been a chair or a lamp, something functional and forgettable. His two associates didn't even look at her at all. She handed them the leather-bound menus, her hands steady despite her racing pulse. Nakamura took his without a word, without any acknowledgement that she was even a person standing there. And so it began. From the very first moment, Kenji Nakamura was impossible to please. He studied the wine list with a deep frown, then fired technical questions at Elena about the vintages, questions clearly designed to trip her up, to expose her ignorance. But Elena had spent 3 years working in high-end restaurants. She knew her wines. She answered each question calmly, accurately, and professionally. She could see a flash of irritation in his eyes when she got every answer right. He ordered an appetizer, and when Elena brought it out, a beautiful arrangement of seared scallops with delicate saffron foam, he took exactly one bite and pushed the plate away. "Overcooked," he said flatly. "Take it back." Elena didn't argue. "Of course, sir. I'll speak to the chef immediately." The second appetizer came out perfect, or so the chef insisted. Nakamura ate it in silence, but his expression made it clear he found it mediocre at best. His two associates, watching his every reaction like their lives depended on it, quickly agreed with everything he implied. "Yes, not quite right," one murmured. "Could be better," the other added quickly. As the evening crawled forward, Nakamura found fault with everything. The lighting was too bright, the music was irritating, the table was too close to the kitchen. Each complaint was delivered in that same cold, flat tone, never raising his voice, which somehow made it worse. Like he was so far above them that even his displeasure was delivered with icy restraint. Elena handled each issue with grace, apologizing sincerely, fixing what could be fixed, enduring what couldn't be, keeping that professional smile in place even as something inside her began to crack. Across the dining room, Catherine was watching with barely concealed delight. Every time Elena had to return to the kitchen with another complaint, Catherine would smirk and whisper to the other servers. Elena could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her, some sympathetic, some gleeful, all waiting to see if she'd break. The main courses finally arrived. Elena carried them carefully to the table, 3 plates of the restaurant's signature dish. Perfectly cooked beef tenderloin with seasonal vegetables and a red wine reduction that the chef was famous for. She moved to place the first plate in front of Nakamura, her movements practiced and precise. But at that exact moment, one of the executives gestured dramatically while speaking, trying desperately to agree with something his boss had said. His hand hit the edge of the table, just hard enough to make it shake. It was the tiniest movement, barely noticeable. But it was enough. A single drop of water from the pitcher in Elena's hand fell through the air in what felt like slow motion and landed on the sleeve of Kenji Nakamura's immaculate suit jacket. The world stopped. Nakamura froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. So slowly it felt like watching ice form, he lowered it back to the table. He stared down at the tiny dark spot on his sleeve. A spot so small most people wouldn't even notice it. But to him, it might as well have been a bucket of mud. "I am so sorry, sir," Elena said immediately, reaching for a clean napkin. "Please let me." Nakamura held up one hand, stopping her mid-sentence. He didn't look at her. He just stared at that tiny spot on his sleeve, his jaw tightening, a muscle twitching in his cheek. Then, still not looking at Elena, believing she was just another ignorant English server who couldn't understand anything beyond her own language, Kenji Nakamura turned to his two associates and began speaking in rapid, flowing Japanese. What he said was absolutely devastating, and Elena understood every single word. The Japanese words flowed from Nakamura's mouth like poison, smooth, casual, venomous. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. The contempt in his voice was enough to cut through steel. If you translated what he said into English, it would go something like this. "Look at this clumsy fool. They hire these people based on their looks and call it service. She probably has the intelligence of a child. All she's good for is standing there looking decorative, completely useless. No wonder this country is falling apart. They put idiots like this in charge of even the simplest tasks." His two executives immediately laughed nervously, eager to please laughs that made Elena's stomach turn. They were performing for their boss, showing him they agreed, that they were on his side, that they found his cruelty entertaining. They looked at Elena with a mixture of pity and disdain, comfortable in their secret language, confident that she had no idea what had just been said about her. But they were catastrophically wrong. Elena understood every single syllable. Every hateful word landed in her mind with perfect crystal clarity. The formal Japanese structure, the specific vocabulary he'd chosen to demean her, the casual cruelty of a powerful man who thought himself completely untouchable. She understood not just the words, but the deep disrespect behind them. The way he'd reduced her to nothing more than a decoration, an object without thoughts or feelings or dignity. The way he'd dismissed her entire existence as worthless. For a long moment, Elena just stood there, the water pitcher still in her hand. To everyone watching Pemberton hovering anxiously nearby, Catherine observing from across the room with gleeful anticipation, the other diners trying not to stare, it just looked like a waitress standing quietly while customers spoke in a foreign language. But inside Elena, something was breaking. Or maybe something was finally breaking free. She thought about every time someone had looked through her like she wasn't there. Every condescending comment from Catherine. Every moment she'd had to smile and nod while being treated as less than human. Every shift where her aching feet and tired mind were just the price she paid to chase her dreams. She thought about the year she spent in Tokyo, living with the Tanaka family who welcomed her like a daughter, learning not just the language but the culture, the respect, the deep appreciation for courtesy and dignity that was woven into every interaction. She fell in love with Japan, with its beauty, its depth, its elegance. And here was this man using her beloved language as a weapon, turning something beautiful into something ugly and cruel. The professional smile slowly faded from Elena's face. Her spine straightened. It was a subtle shift, but it changed everything about her posture, her presence, her energy. She was no longer a deferential server. She was a woman who had enough. She carefully placed the water pitcher on the side table with deliberate precision. The two executives were still chuckling, enjoying their boss's joke at her expense. Nakamura was examining his sleeve with theatrical disgust, playing up the moment, reveling in his superiority. Then Elena spoke, and she spoke in perfect, flawless Japanese. Her accent was Tokyo standard, the kind you'd hear from a university professor or a news broadcaster. Every word was precisely chosen, grammatically perfect, delivered with a calm, steady confidence that cut through the room like a blade. In English, what she said was this: "Sir, your assumption that my profession reflects my intelligence is as flawed as your understanding of basic human respect. Perhaps someone of your business success should have learned by now that wisdom and worth are not determined by the job someone does, but by the character they show. Clearly, that is a lesson you have failed to learn." She paused, letting the words sink in like stones dropping into still water. Then she continued, her voice never wavering. "And if we are discussing competence, I should point out that you used the wrong honorific level when addressing your colleagues earlier. For business associates of equal standing, the more respectful form would be appropriate. But then, perhaps accuracy is less important to you than the sound of your own voice." The effect was instantaneous and absolute. Kenji Nakamura's face went completely white. The color drained from his skin like someone had pulled a plug. His mouth actually fell open, his eyes going wide with genuine shock, perhaps the first time in years that anyone had seen such an unguarded expression on his face. This was a man who commanded boardrooms full of powerful executives, who'd built a business empire through sheer force of will, who was accustomed to controlling every situation. He entered to being the smartest, most powerful person in any room, and a waitress had just intellectually dismantled him in his own language. The two junior executives looked like they'd seen a ghost. Their faces went pale, then red, then pale again in rapid succession. They stared at Elena, then at their boss, then back at Elena, their minds seemingly unable to process what had just happened. They'd laughed at her, they'd been complicit in mocking her. And she understood every word. From across the dining room, Catherine's wine glass slipped from her fingers. She caught it just before it fell, but her mouth hung open in shock, her usual composure completely shattered. Pemberton, who was approaching the table to check on things, stopped dead in his tracks. He didn't understand Japanese, but he understood body language. He understood that something massive had just happened, that the power dynamic had just shifted in a way that defied his comprehension. Other diners at nearby tables had stopped eating, sensing the tension, watching this extraordinary moment unfold like spectators at a car crash. The silence stretched out, thick and heavy and electric. Elena stood there, her head high, her gaze steady and unwavering. She said what needed to be said. She defended her dignity in the language of the man who tried to steal it from her. And she wasn't backing down. Nakamura's shock was slowly transforming into something else. The color was returning to his face, but it wasn't the pale coldness from before. There was a flush creeping up his neck, a mixture of embarrassment and something that looked almost like respect. He opened his mouth and closed it, opened it again. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, uncertain, completely different from the arrogant tone of moments before. He spoke in Japanese, the language of their confrontation. "Who are you?" he asked. It was a simple question in any language, but this time it wasn't dismissive, it wasn't rhetorical, it was genuine. He was truly asking, "Who is this person who just shattered my assumptions about the world?" Elena met Kenji Nakamura's gaze without flinching, without fear, without apology. She responded in the same flawless Japanese, her voice calm and measured. "My name is Elena Chen. I am your server this evening." The simplicity of her answer was devastating. She wasn't apologizing, she wasn't backing down, she wasn't trying to soften the blow, she was stating a fact, claiming her identity, refusing to let him define her by his expectations. And in that moment, everything changed. Before you go any further in this story, I want you to do something for me. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever been underestimated by someone? Have you ever had a moment where you got to prove them completely wrong? Share your story. I read every single comment, and I love hearing from you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now, because stories like Elena's stories about finding your voice and refusing to be silenced are the stories we need more of in this world. Now let's see what happens next. Kenji Nakamura leaned back in his chair, studying Elena with completely new eyes. The arrogance was gone, replaced by intense, almost predatory curiosity. He looked at her the way a master jeweler might examine a diamond he'd mistaken for glass. "That is not what I asked," he said, still in Japanese, his voice lower now, more controlled. "Where did you learn to speak like this?" Elena took a quiet breath before answering. She could feel every eye in the restaurant on her, but she kept her focus on Nakamura. "I spent a year in Tokyo on a full academic scholarship, studying at Waseda University. I lived with a host family in Setagaya. My research focused on the social linguistics of honorific speech patterns in modern Japanese society." She watched his face as she spoke and watched the information register. Waseda University was one of Japan's most prestigious institutions. The detail about honorifics was pointed, deliberate. She was reminding him that she noticed his mistake, that she wasn't just fluent, she was educated in the deep structures of his language. Nakamura's expression shifted again. There was something in his eyes now that looked almost like pain. Shame, perhaps, or the uncomfortable recognition of his own cruelty being reflected back at him like light off a mirror. One of his executives, the younger one with nervous energy, cleared his throat and tried to smooth things over, speaking quickly in Japanese. "Sir, perhaps we should just continue with the meal and—" "Be quiet," Nakamura snapped, cutting him off with brutal efficiency. Then he said something that made the young man's face go red with humiliation. "You laughed like a fool at my joke. You are just as guilty of disrespect as I am. Perhaps more, because you should have known better than to mock someone based on their occupation." The executive shrank back in his seat, thoroughly chastised. The other associate stared down at his plate, clearly wishing he could disappear through the floor. Pemberton, unable to stand the confusion and tension any longer, hurried over with quick, anxious steps. "Is everything all right, Miss Chen? If there's a problem, I can certainly—" "Everything is fine, Mr. Pemberton," Elena said quietly, switching back to English. "We were just discussing the menu. but Pemberton could see it wasn't fine. The whole atmosphere had changed. The temperature in the room had shifted. He looked between Elena and Nakamura, completely lost, reading the tension but unable to understand its source. "Perhaps I should assign another server?" he suggested weakly. "No," Nakamura said sharply in English, his accent heavy but his tone absolute. "She stays." Pemberton backed away, confused and frightened, leaving them in their strange standoff. Nakamura continued to study Elena with that intense gaze, and she could practically see his mind working, calculating, reassessing. He was a businessman above all else. He recognized value when he saw it, even when it came in an unexpected package, even when it had just humiliated him in front of his employees. He gestured to the empty chair at the table. "Sit down," he said in English. Elena shook her head. "I'm working, sir. I can't." "I am making it a business meeting," he interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "Sit, please." That last word, please, seemed to cost him something. It wasn't a word that came naturally to his lips. She could see the effort it took. Elena hesitated. This was completely against restaurant policy. She could lose her job for this. But something in his tone had changed. The coldness was still there, but there was also genuine interest, and perhaps the beginning of something like respect. She sat down carefully, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. Across the dining room, she could feel Catherine's furious stare burning into her back like a laser. She could imagine the rumors already forming, the whispers that would follow her. Nakamura switched back to Japanese, speaking more carefully now, more respectfully. His whole demeanor had shifted. "My company is expanding in Europe. We are buying properties, developing them, and working with local businesses and governments. It is complicated work. Cultural differences cause problems. Misunderstandings cost money and time, millions of pounds in some cases." He paused, choosing his words with precision. "I have translators. I have many translators, but they translate words only. They do not translate meaning. They do not understand the space between what people say and what they actually mean." Elena listened carefully, beginning to understand where this was going. Her pulse quickened despite her attempt to remain calm. "I need someone who can do more than translate," Nakamura continued, leaning forward slightly. "Someone who understands culture deeply. Someone who can tell me when a British business partner says, 'That's interesting,' but really means absolutely not. Someone who can help my Japanese team understand why their direct communication style offends Europeans. Someone who can bridge the gap between worlds." He looked directly at her, and for the first time she saw him truly seeing her not as a waitress, not as decoration, but as a person with value. Someone like you. Then he switched to English, perhaps to make sure there was absolutely no misunderstanding about what he was offering. "I am offering you a position with my company. You would work with my international development team as a cultural liaison and senior translator. 6 months in London, then 6 months in Tokyo, rotating. The salary would be £75,000 per year, plus housing assistance, plus travel expenses, plus full benefits." Elena felt the air leave her lungs completely. £75,000. That was more money than she'd ever imagined earning, especially straight out of university. That was freedom from debt, from struggling, from counting every penny and choosing between heating and food. That was the kind of opportunity people spent their entire careers working toward. But it was being offered by the man who, just minutes ago, had called her useless and stupid. The man who tried to humiliate her in a language he thought she couldn't understand. "Hey, I want to pause here for just a second because I need your thoughts. If you were in Elena's position right now, what would you do? Would you take the job from someone who disrespected you so deeply? Or would you walk away on principle? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm genuinely curious about what you think. And if you're finding Elena's courage inspiring, make sure you're subscribed because we share stories like this every single week. Stories about people who refuse to be broken. Now let's see what Elena decides. "Why?" Elena asked simply, still in Japanese. Her voice was steady, but her heart was racing. "Why would you offer this to me after what you said?" For the first time since he'd walked into the Sterling Crown, Kenji Nakamura looked genuinely uncomfortable. He glanced down at his hands, then back at her. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, less certain than she'd ever heard it. Because you did something no one in my company does. You told me the truth. You showed me my mistake. You didn't smile and apologize and make it easy for me to continue being wrong. He gestured to his two associates, who were staring at their plates like they might find escape routes written in the sauce. Everyone who works for me is afraid. They tell me what I want to hear. They laugh at my jokes even when they are not funny. They never challenge me, never correct me, never tell me when I'm being. He paused, searching for the word. Being an ass. Despite everything, Elena felt a small smile tug at the corner of her mouth at his choice of English slang. Nakamura continued. Look at them. They will go back to the office tomorrow and tell everyone how brilliant I was tonight. They will never mention that I made a complete fool of myself. They will never mention that I was cruel and wrong. This is how empires fall when no one tells the emperor he is naked. He leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes intense. You are not afraid of me. That is rare. That is valuable. More valuable than 100 sycophants who tell me I'm wonderful, while I drive my company into the ground with my own arrogance. Elena sat there in that expensive restaurant, her heart racing, her mind spinning with possibilities and doubts and questions. 75,000 pounds, a real career. The chance to use everything she learned, everything she worked so hard for. The opportunity to bridge two cultures she loved deeply. To spend time in Tokyo again, to use her Japanese every single day, to make a real difference in how businesses communicated across borders. But at what cost? Could she work for a man who showed such casual cruelty? Would accepting his offer mean accepting that his behavior was okay? Would she be betraying herself, selling out for money? I need time to think about this, she said quietly, switching back to English. Nakamura nodded slowly. There was respect in that nod, real respect. He'd expected her to jump at the offer immediately, and the fact that she hadn't impressed him even more. It confirmed what he'd already begun to suspect: principles, standards, self-respect, all the things money couldn't buy. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, sleek black with minimal silver text. He wrote something on the back with an expensive pen. Come to my office tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. This is the address. We will discuss the details, answer any questions you have, and you can give me your decision then. He paused, then added with the ghost of a smile. And Miss Chen, do not be late. I may be trying to become a better person, but I am still Japanese about punctuality. With that, he stood up. His two associates scrambled to their feet as well, eager to escape this mortifying evening. Nakamura pulled out several large bills from his wallet and placed them on the table, far more than enough to cover the meal and an extraordinarily generous tip. He looked at Elena one last time, and there might have been the ghost of genuine respect in his expression. Thank you, he said simply in Japanese, for the lesson. Then he was gone, striding out of the restaurant with his entourage trailing behind him like confused ducklings. Elena sat there for a moment longer, the business card heavy in her hand, feeling like she'd just survived a hurricane. The dining room was completely silent. Every single person was staring at her. Pemberton rushed over, his face purple with confusion and barely suppressed anger. Chen, what on earth was that about? You sat at a customer's table. I quit, Elena said simply, standing up. The words came out before she even fully decided to say them. But once they were out, hanging in the air between them, she knew they were right. She knew they were true. I'm giving you my notice, effective immediately. Pemberton sputtered, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. You can't just quit, you have obligations. But Elena was already walking away, heading toward the staff room to collect her things. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her steps were steady. Behind her, she could hear Catherine's voice, sharp and venomous, carrying across the dining room. She probably offered him something. That's what happened. That's the only way someone like her could. Elena didn't turn around. She didn't need to. Let Catherine think what she wanted. Let them all think about what they wanted. None of it mattered anymore. Everything had changed. That night, Elena barely slept. She lay in her small flat, staring at the ceiling, the business card on her nightstand like a ticking bomb. Could she work for him? For a man who said such terrible things about her? Would accepting his offer mean accepting that his behavior was okay? Would she be betraying herself, selling out for money? But another voice in her head argued back. The money wasn't just for her. It would help her mother, who worked 2 jobs for years to help Elena get through school. It would mean Elena could finally pay off her crushing student loans. It would mean security, opportunity, a real future. And just maybe working for Nakamura wouldn't be selling out. Maybe it would be something else entirely. Maybe she could be a voice of honesty in his world of yes men. Maybe she could help him see people differently, treat people better. Maybe she could make a real difference. She thought about her year in Tokyo, about the Tanaka family who showed her such kindness, about how much she loved the culture, the language, the way of thinking. This job would let her bridge 2 worlds she cared about deeply. As dawn broke over London, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Elena made her decision. She showered, dressed in the most professional outfit she owned, a simple navy dress and blazer she bought secondhand but tailored herself, and made her way across the city. The Nakamura Property Group headquarters was a tower of steel and glass in Canary Wharf, impressive and intimidating. Elena walked through the gleaming lobby, gave her name to the receptionist, and was whisked up to the top floor in an elevator that moved so fast her ears popped. Nakamura's office was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Thames. He was standing by the window when she entered, his back to her, hands clasped behind him. He didn't turn around immediately. "You came," he said in Japanese. "I did," Elena replied in the same language. "But I have conditions." Now he turned, one eyebrow raised in surprise. "Conditions?" Elena stood tall, channeling every bit of courage she possessed. "First, I will never accept being spoken to disrespectfully. Not in English, not in Japanese, not in any language. I'm happy to receive professional feedback, but I will not tolerate being demeaned. Ever." Nakamura's face was unreadable. She continued, her voice steady. "Second, I'm finishing my degree. I need some flexibility in my schedule for the next few months to complete my coursework. My work for you won't suffer, but my education is important to me." She took a breath before the final condition, the boldest one. "And third, the housing assistance you mentioned, I'd like part of it to be used differently. I want you to create a scholarship fund for language students at London University. Students who want to study abroad but can't afford it. Students like I was. Call it the Nakamura Cultural Exchange Scholarship." She held her breath. She asked for the impossible, demanding respect from a man known for his harshness, and asking him to spend money on something that had no business value whatsoever. The silence stretched out painfully. Then slowly, Kenji Nakamura began to smile. It was a real smile, not the cold smirk from the night before, but something genuine and warm. "Miss Chen," he said in English, "you are even more formidable than I thought." He walked to his desk and pulled out a folder. "I accept your conditions, all of them. The scholarship is actually a good idea, good publicity for the company, and perhaps good for my karma." He pushed the folder toward her. "This is your contract. Read it carefully. Take it to a lawyer if you wish. If you're satisfied, sign it and start on Monday." Elena took the folder with shaking hands. She did it. She walked into the lion's den and not only survived but came out with exactly what she wanted. As she turned to leave, Nakamura spoke again, this time in careful, respectful Japanese. "Miss Chen, thank you for last night, for showing me what I had become. I needed that wake-up call." Elena looked back at him and saw something she hadn't expected to see: humility. "We all need reminders sometimes," she said gently, "about what really matters, about treating people with dignity." The first 3 months at Nakamura Property Group were harder than Elena had imagined. She thought the difficult part was over, that after standing up to Nakamura, everything else would be easier. She was wrong. The other executives in the London office resented her immediately. They saw her as Nakamura's pet project, someone who got her position through drama rather than merit. They excluded her from meetings, forgot to copy her on important emails, and spoke over her in discussions. And Nakamura himself, despite his promises, still had moments where his old arrogance flared up. Moments where he'd snap at people, dismiss ideas without listening, revert to the ice emperor everyone feared. One particularly brutal afternoon, Elena watched him eviscerate a junior analyst in a meeting, publicly humiliating the young man for a minor mistake. the same casual cruelty she witnessed at the Sterling Crown. After the meeting, Elena confronted him in his office. "This is exactly what you promised you wouldn't do," she said in Japanese, her voice tight with anger. "You're doing it again. You're treating people like they're disposable." Nakamura's face hardened. "You don't understand business, Miss Chen. Sometimes people need to be—" "No," Elena interrupted. "You're wrong, and if you can't see that, then I made a mistake accepting this position." She placed her security badge on his desk. "I'll have my resignation letter to you by the end of day." For a moment, they stared at each other. Then Elena turned and walked toward the door. "Wait," Nakamura said quietly. Elena stopped but didn't turn around. "You're right," he said, and his voice was different and vulnerable. "I'm right back where I started. Old habits, they're harder to break than I thought." Elena turned slowly. Nakamura was sitting at his desk, looking older somehow, tired. "Help me," he said simply. "That's why I hired you, isn't it? To tell me when I'm being, what did I call it? An ass?" Despite everything, Elena felt a small smile. "Yes, that's exactly why you hired me." She picked up her badge. "But this is your last chance. Next time, I will walk, and I mean it." Things changed after that conversation, slowly, gradually, but genuinely. Nakamura started asking Elena to observe his meetings and give him honest feedback afterward. He began pausing before speaking in anger, taking a breath, choosing his words more carefully. He apologized to the junior analyst he humiliated, publicly, in front of the entire team. The other executives slowly began to respect Elena, not because of her title, but because they saw the effect she had. The office became less tense, more collaborative. People stopped being afraid to share ideas. And the scholarship fund? The first recipients were announced. 5 students would get to study abroad, just like Elena had. 5 futures changed. One evening, as they were reviewing a contract for a major Tokyo development, Nakamura looked up at Elena. "You know," he said in Japanese, "my wife left me 3 years ago. She said I became someone she didn't recognize. Someone cold and cruel. I told her she was weak for not understanding the pressures of business." He paused, his expression distant. "But she was right, and you're helping me find the person I used to be, before the empire, before the money, when I actually cared about people." Elena felt something shift in that moment. This wasn't just a job anymore. This was important work, human work. "We all lose ourselves sometimes," she said softly. "The important thing is finding the way back." 6 months later, Elena stood in the Tokyo office of Nakamura Property Group, looking out at the glittering city she fell in love with years ago. The expansion project she was working on, a massive mixed-use development that required coordination between Japanese investors, British architects, and local London communities, was finally coming together. But it had almost fallen apart spectacularly. The British team had been using casual, friendly language that the Japanese investors found disrespectful. The Japanese team's direct feedback style had offended the British architects. Millions of pounds and years of work had been on the verge of collapse because no one understood each other. That's when Elena stepped in. She spent 2 weeks shuttling between teams, translating not just words but intentions, explaining cultural contexts, building bridges. She taught the British team about Japanese business etiquette. She helped the Japanese team understand British communication norms. And then, in the final negotiation meeting with everyone present, when the deal was about to fall apart over a misunderstood clause, Elena stood up and addressed both sides in their own languages, switching fluidly between English and Japanese, explaining what each side actually meant versus what they actually said. The room fell silent as understanding dawned. The deal was signed, millions of pounds secured, hundreds of jobs created, a development that would revitalize an entire London neighborhood while honoring its history. Nakamura, who was watching from the head of the table, stood and began to clap. Soon everyone joined in, British and Japanese alike, applauding not the deal but the person who made it possible. After the meeting, Nakamura approached Elena with an envelope. "Open it," he said. Inside was a promotion letter, Senior Director of International Relations, a substantial raise, and a permanent position splitting time between London and Tokyo. "You've earned this," Nakamura said, "not because of one dramatic moment in a restaurant, but because of everything you've done since. Because you've made this company better. Because you've made me better. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you for giving me the chance, for listening, for changing. No, Nakamura said seriously. Thank you for not giving up on me, for seeing who I could be, even when I've forgotten myself. 3 years later, Elena Chen wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. She helped Nakamura Property Group successfully expand across Europe, bridging cultural gaps and preventing countless misunderstandings that could have cost millions. She earned the respect of everyone in the company, not because of her title, but because of her wisdom and her unwavering integrity. And the Nakamura Cultural Exchange Scholarship, it had sent 32 students abroad to study languages and cultures. 32 young people who, like Elena, had the passion and intelligence, but not the money. 32 futures changed forever. As for Nakamura himself, he was still tough and demanding, but he was different too. More thoughtful, more aware of how his words affected people, more willing to listen before speaking. He even reconnected with his ex-wife. They were taking things slowly, but there was hope there, hope that he could rebuild what he almost destroyed. One afternoon, Elena received a message that made her smile. It was from Catherine, her old tormentor from the Sterling Crown. The restaurant had closed 6 months ago with bad management, poor reviews, and staff complaints. Catherine was asking if Elena knew of any job openings. Elena could have ignored it, could have let karma take its course, but instead she made a phone call. 2 weeks later, Catherine started work in Nakamura Property Group's Hospitality Coordination Department. A fresh start, a second chance, because that's what Elena had learned. Everyone deserves the opportunity to grow, to change, to become better than they were. Elena's story reminds us of something powerful. Your worth is not defined by your job title, your uniform, or what other people think of you. Your worth comes from who you are inside your knowledge, your dignity, your courage to speak truth, even when it's frightening. Sometimes the people who seem the most powerful are actually the most fragile, hiding their insecurity behind cruelty and arrogance. And sometimes the people who seem powerless have a strength that can change everything, including themselves and the people around them. One moment of courage, one perfect response at exactly the right time, one decision to stand up for your dignity rather than accept disrespect. That's all it takes to open doors you never imagined possible. Elena didn't just defend herself that night at the Sterling Crown. She changed the course of her entire life. She proved that true power doesn't come from money or status or intimidation. It comes from knowing your own value and refusing to let anyone diminish it. And that's a lesson worth remembering, no matter what language you speak. If this story touched your heart, if Elena's courage inspired you, I want you to do 3 things for me right now. First, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. We share stories like this every week, stories about ordinary people showing extraordinary strength. Second, drop a comment below and tell me, what's one moment in your life where you stood up for yourself, where you refused to be diminished? I read every single comment and I want to hear your story. And third, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's been underestimated, overlooked, or treated as less than they are. Because we all need reminders that our worth isn't determined by other people's opinions, it's determined by the truth of who we are. Remember, you are worthy of respect. Your dreams are valid. Your voice matters. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. This is Unbroken Truths, and I'll see you in the next story.